What's going on, everyone? My name is Jasmine. On today's episode of the Slam Project, we're going to be talking about the Rapid Creek deaths. This took place in Rapid City, South Dakota in the late 1990s, and in a 14-month period, 8 men were found deceased in the creek. Law enforcement believes that these men simply passed out when they were drunk and drowned to death, but a lot of people think otherwise. Don't forget to check out my other videos, and if you want to see more videos on missing and murdered Indigenous people, click that subscribe button and the notification bell. Now let's get right into it. Rapid City is located just east of the Black Hills National Forest. The Lakota regard the Black Hills as a sacred and spiritual place. The traditional homelands of the Lakota used to stretch hundreds of miles, and there are several Lakota bands in the region. Many tribal members relocate to Rapid City, and for the ones who are stuck in addiction, life in the city can be a struggle. In 2023, it was estimated that there were about 500 homeless people living in the city, and that about 76% of them were native. Many of them live along Rapid Creek that runs along the downtown core. Back in the day, there was a push by the city to run the homeless out of abandoned buildings and houses, and this caused them to gravitate towards the creek. Various parks are spread along the creek, and it is a popular spot for recreation in the city. Many people enjoy the park system and often will go there to exercise, ride their bicycles along the many bike paths, play golf, and tube, kayak, and fish in the creek. With this many people using the area for recreation and for homeless encampments, it is not unusual to have a couple of deaths throughout the year. The creek can often quickly rise to an unsafe level, and sometimes people can be caught off guard and drown. In 1972, severe rains caused Rapid Creek to flood when a dam failed, resulting in 238 people dying in Rapid City, and there were over 3,000 injuries. It is the deadliest flood in South Dakota history. But in a 14-month period in 1998 and 1999, 8 men would be found deceased in the creek. 6 were native and 2 were not. These were all unattended deaths that did not have any witnesses to recall what exactly happened. Because of the large body count in a short period of time, some people in law enforcement initially thought something more sinister could be going on. But none of the bodies showed any signs of foul play, and ultimately, these deaths were chalked up to being caused by either alcohol poisoning or drowning, with contributing factors such as coronary disease and cirrhosis of the liver. Many people refuse to believe this explanation and think it was possible these men were forcibly held underwater or rolled into the creek as they slept. What really happened along Rapid Creek, and was there an unknown serial killer or group of killers that have never been identified? Benjamin Long Wolf Sr. was the first man to be found dead. He was 36 years old and from Martin, South Dakota, on the Pine Ridge Reservation. His obituary says he came from a large family. He had 5 brothers and 4 sisters. Benjamin was also married and had 7 children. He sometimes worked as a construction laborer, but he wound up along the creek. He was found on Thursday, May 21, 1998, at around 12:20 p.m. by a passerby. He was near the 6th Street Bridge, and he was found half sitting up and face down in the creek. His blood alcohol content measured at 0.374, and authorities believe that he fell asleep and was too drunk to notice that the creek was rising around him. The second man to be found was 56-year-old George Hatton. He also was known as George Fast Horse. He was found only 10 days after Benjamin on Sunday, May 31, 1998. A man walking on a sidewalk near the West Boulevard and I-90 bridge spotted him face down in the creek at about 6:30 p.m. Reports say that he was partially submerged in the creek. There was also another homeless man sleeping nearby, and he was a friend of George's. No other information was given about this friend, so it can be assumed that he never saw or heard anything. George's BAC was listed as .364, and his cause of death was determined to be drowning. 42-year-old Alan Hogue was the third man to be found on Saturday, July 4th, 1998. Alan was from Rapid City and was not native. A fisherman found him near the East St. Patrick Bridge at about 5:40 p.m. The water was noted to be high at the time and fast-moving. It is not known how he got into the water or where it occurred. Reports say that there was only a small amount of alcohol in his system. So far, there have been 3 men found in the creek in just a little over 2 months, and it was determined that all of them had drowned. Things would be quiet until December when 2 more bodies were found within 36 hours of each other. Randelle Crow was 48 years old when his lifeless body was found on Tuesday, December 8, 1998. Randelle was from Whitehorse, South Dakota on the Cheyenne River Reservation. He was found under the East Boulevard Bridge, which is a popular place for the homeless to sleep. The water was shallow at the time, and his head was out of the water and near the creek bank. Police interviewed 4 people who had been with him the previous night. They all said he was fine when he showed up, and they all began to drink heavily. As the night wore on, a couple of drunken fights broke out, but ultimately, none of them knew how he ended up dead. His autopsy showed minor cuts and bruises, and his BAC was listed as being .55, which is extremely high. The pathologist concluded that he died of alcohol poisoning and possible hypothermia. The next day, on Wednesday, December 9, 1998, 33-year-old Loren was found. He was from the Pine Ridge Reservation and had a wife and 5 kids. He was also a talented artist, and his work was on display in numerous galleries in the area. He also would paint murals at the Detox Center in Rapid City when he stayed there. He was found downstream and about a half block from the East Boulevard Bridge, the same bridge where Randelle was found the previous day. Police say that other than the location, there is no connection to Randelle. His autopsy measured his BAC as .531, and it was concluded his cause of death was alcohol poisoning and an underlying cause of cirrhosis of the liver. Now, by this time, members of the public, along with the police, took notice of the high concentration of deaths within a 7-month period. The Rapid City Police began reviewing each individual death and the group as a whole. They were trying to determine if they missed anything or missed something that could tie all of the men together. Other than the men being intoxicated and sleeping near the creek, they had nothing to link the deaths together. In January 1999, Rapid City Police Department spokesman Captain Craig Teason said there was no credible information to suggest the 5 deaths were criminal in nature. No new information was uncovered during the review, and there was nothing there to cast doubt on the causes of death. But after the police began reviewing the cases after the last death on December 9th, the deaths stopped for almost 6 months. On Saturday, May 29, 1999, a 44-year-old man from Rapid City named Dirk Bartling was found dead in the creek. Dirk was homeless at the time and occasionally worked as a carpenter. He was the second non-native found in the creek. 2 fishermen found him near Roosevelt Park and pulled him out of the water, but it was too late for him. His official cause of death was listed as drowning, and his BAC was measured at .288. Just over a week later, 45-year-old Arthur Chamberlain was also found in the creek. At about 2:15 p.m. on Monday, June 7, 1999, a person on the bicycle path spotted him just off Steel Street. Arthur was from Lake Andes on the Yankton Sioux Reservation. According to his friend and sister, he was not known to hang out around the creek. His sister would honor him by leaving spirit plates at the site where his body was found. The final man to be found was 49-year-old Timothy Bullbear. At about 2:15 p.m. on Tuesday, July 8, 1999, he was spotted in the creek by some fishermen near Orchard Lane. Timothy was from the Pine Ridge Reservation, and he was married with several children. He was a drummer and singer and spent the 4th of July at a Sundance on the reservation. His autopsy says that he drowned, and his BAC is listed as being .26, and one news article says that his cause of death is not known, but all other accounts say he drowned. But these 3 additional bodies in a 7-week period caused additional cause for concern. Rumors were going around that skinheads were in the city, and they were the ones causing the deaths in the creek. A man named Clement Standing Elk was interviewed, and he claimed that they were in the park, saying that they were going to throw another dead Indian in. Clement lived under a bridge with his friends. He said they stopped hanging out by themselves and started traveling in packs. His friend Dean Two Sticks also did not think these deaths were accidental and said he didn't believe the killer was another homeless person because everyone is like family. But Clement was not the only person to say that they saw skinheads in the park. Brian Davis was also interviewed at the local mission. He was from the Crow Creek Reservation and knew all 8 men. He had been sober for 90 days at the time he was interviewed and claimed he saw skinheads walking by the creek before. He said they were dressed normal, wore boots, and had short hair. Another man named Tony Pepe from the Cheyenne River Reservation has been in a wheelchair, resulting from being shot in the spine when he was 8. In October 1999, Tony said he was approached by a man who said he would give him some money if he broke a $50 bill for him. He agreed and left with the man. Tony said when they were out of sight from his friends, the man threw him out of his chair and started beating him. The attacker stood on his neck and said he was going to be the 9th dead Indian. The attacker ran away when an elderly couple came down the walkway. He described the man as white, about 6 feet 2 inches tall, short blonde hair, and wearing a White Sox jacket. Tony reported this to the police, and he said that they were unconcerned and more worried about who he was and if he had warrants. In July 1999, Pennington County Sheriff Don Holloway and Rapid City Police Chief Tom Hennies walked the creek to assess how they could make it safer for the people living there and for people using the park. They observed several campsites, garbage debris, and interviewed several people. The city eventually removed garbage piles and cut the brush around the creek so it would be easier to see during routine patrols. Rapid City Police also denied skinheads were ever involved because they say that they were not in their city at the time. This is despite the fact that racial groups were known to be in the area. The city also holds a nickname among locals, and that is Racist City. But the large concentrations of unattended deaths had everyone scratching their heads. Police Chief Tom Hennies began to think that there were too many bodies for this to be a coincidence. Pennington County Sheriff Deputy de Glasgow knew most of the dead men because he used to run the city's detox center. He was close with Loren and admired his artwork. The deputy commented and said he was not saying all were murders or accidental drownings, and it was not his job to say that they were all coincidental deaths, but he had to investigate them as if they were perpetrated by someone else until it could be proved otherwise. He added that he did not believe that they were coincidences. Sheriff Don Holloway said he does not know if the deaths were accidental, but believed that there were too many in a short time to be accidental. He also believed it would be uncovered that several of the deaths were connected. He went on to say that most accidental drownings in the creek were from recreational activities. Lieutenant John Fields was the investigative lead on the case, and his office gathered 4 thick binders of information. He went on to say that these deaths might be lifestyle deaths and that anyone who falls asleep next to the creek risks being washed away. He said there could be other possibilities, such as taking their own lives or murder. The Rapid Creek deaths eventually reached national news. Investigators initiated a second probe into the deaths and reached out to the FBI, the South Dakota Department of Criminal Investigations, and the Mid-States Organized Crime Information Center. At the FBI, the cases were sent to the National Center for Analysis of Violent Crime, which investigates especially violent or abnormal crimes such as serial killings and abductions. Criminal profilers there first received information on the Rapid Creek deaths in August of 1999. The Mid-State Organized Crime Information Center is located in Springfield, Missouri. They also received the case file in August of 1999, and it consisted of approximately 1,500 pages. They sent the Rapid City Police a 33-page report that consisted of charts, maps, and an assessment report. But ultimately, these deaths were not ever connected as a string of serial murders. Captain James Joe Hughes with the Rapid City Criminal Investigations Division later said that these cases are not classified as unsolved deaths or criminal in nature and that there was nothing to investigate. Local Native advocates held marches throughout the city to bring more awareness to this issue, and many local Native groups also began doing citizen patrols along the creek. They were concerned for the safety of the tribal members who lived along the creek. The Rapid City Police believed that they did everything they could do and spent thousands of hours investigating. They said the result would have been the same if the victims were white. This is a credible statement because local law enforcement investigated tirelessly when a 22-year-old Native man named Richard Brewer disappeared and was found murdered in September 1990. Their efforts solved his case and sent his killer to prison. But these Rapid Creek deaths were especially hard to connect because other than minor cuts and bruises, there were no signs of foul play. It was only certain where two went into the creek, and the rest of them, the point of origin is unknown. And there were no witnesses to come forward saying they saw someone harm them. But since there were no witnesses, how can anyone prove these men were forcibly held underwater or rolled into the creek as they slept? The men's lifestyle and racial stereotyping could have caused less public and police concern in the early days of the deaths. Some also argue that since two of the men were white, that if there was a killer on the loose, it was not racially motivated. But in the dark of night, someone could have assumed they were Native because they were next to the creek. Police did not critically think about the deaths until 5 of them had perished in the creek and 7 months had already passed. Most of the deaths seemed to occur in warmer months, except for Randelle Crow and Loren Tubals. They were found in December and had the highest BACs. They could have drunk more in an attempt to feel warmer. These 2 men were the only ones not listed as drownings, but listed as alcohol poisonings. But the truth is, nobody will probably know for certain if foul play was involved unless someone out there confesses to harming these men. Nothing has changed much in Rapid City, and the city still experiences death along the creek and missing homeless people. Please pray the homeless along the creek remain safe and pull themselves out of addiction one day. These men are gone, but not forgotten. Thank you so much for watching today's video. If you knew any of these men or were in Rapid City around the time this happened, please share your memories down below, and I will see you in my next video.